Hey everyone, good to see you. It's Build Your Dream Network virtual water cooler time. So pull up, we're going to have a conversation with my friend Angel Shannon, and we're going to talk stress and looking after ourselves. And thank you, Angel, for bringing your expertise and your insights and your wisdom to this conversation. Okay, so it's a miserable cold day in New York. We've got another polar vortex coming in. We have uncertainty as to when we're going to be out of this pandemic and not have to wear not one mask, but two. What do I do? How do I look after myself? How do I motivate myself to do anything other than curl up in a ball on the couch with a box of chocolate?
Oh my gosh, Kelly, fantastic question, because it is snowy and cold and all of that here in Maryland where I am. And that is really the question of the day, the hour, the month, the year, right? Because it's really been such a long time. And I just can't think of a better question and a better time to talk about what do we need to do, because we're in the middle of winter, right? So it's hibernation season. It's like really trying to push back against, that desire, as you said, to just curl up and lay down versus I've got stuff to do. I need to get these things done. So it's how do we create that balance, right? And what's so important about balance is being right there in that sweet spot. So like not doing too much, not doing too little. Stress in the body just enough so that we keep regenerating those resources to stay well, immune health, mental health, but not pushing it so much that we go over the edge and now we place ourselves in a position of vulnerability to illness. So that's a really great question.
So you said, we need to create some stress. Is there good stress and bad stress?
Absolutely. So there is good stress. There's the good stress that says, like when you work out, you're on the elliptical or you're, doing a good run and you're stressing your body so that then you're building muscle, you're, creating good, a flow of blood flow, creating oxygen in the body and the tissues. That's good stress. There's also a little good stress when we know that we've got something like today, exciting coming up. So it's like, wow, I want to get this done. I want to get these resources in place so we can talk. That's sort of like good, positive stress. We know there's an end point. This isn't something, life-threatening. If it doesn't happen, if it got rescheduled, life wouldn't come to an end, right? If I don't make it to the full 30 minutes and my goal on the elliptical, life isn't going to come to an end. But then the chronic stress, the day to day and month after month, the things that impact our mental health and well-being, that create disease in the body, where we're pushing past, and those reserves that we have get depleted. So like that cortisol, we know that cortisol is that all-important hormone that comes for the fight or flight, response when we're in an emergency. Oh my God, I hear something down in the basement. I better go see what that is. We know that's good stress because we've got that cortisol jumping in to save us. But what happens over time when you are chronically in that 911 state, imagine someone who's just calling 911 every 5 minutes, right? When you're calling up 911 cortisol in your body every single day or round the clock with things that are not real threats, but perceived threats or are real threats, that cortisol response is chronically on and leads to things like high blood pressure, obesity, headaches, thyroid disorder, all that kind of thing that puts us in a state of complete, let's just say, less than optimal function. So what we don't want is that stress that's just repeated over and over and over. And we need to think about how to create structures of rest and renewal.
Okay, and I want to get into that. What about situations where, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm not going to say I'm asking for a friend because I am that friend. I am on my own. Okay, so I was thinking I was handling this whole situation of the past year or so. I thought I was handling it pretty good because, I live on my own, so that might be, for some people very stressful, but I'm kind of okay with that. I'm looking around. I've replaced the plants I killed because I know that I've only got myself to, so, unlike some people, I'm not having to worry about being, the breadwinner, the school teacher and all those other kinds of things. But I had like a tripwire of sort of health, from a plantar fasciitis to all sorts of other stuff being out of line, that I sort of feel like, okay, where this stress tripwire, and I thought I was doing okay. And, it's been a slow slog of 6 months between trying a whole bunch of stuff to get, my health back. People think they're doing okay. And, we've had this low grade stress that has actually built up a whole lot of other problems.
Yeah. Great question. I was talking with a colleague the other day who said something that has now become my mantra, and that is fish notice water last. Fish notice water last. When you're in the situation, you don't really notice what the situation is, right? Only a frog or a bird can see that that's like water, right? Because fish are in the bowl, they're in the water. So it's so hard to see what your situation is until something happens that creates that space of awareness that, oh my gosh, this is water, or oh my gosh, this is a problem. For most of us, it is usually two things, an illness or a crisis, right? And there's nothing like pain. Pain is like the greatest teacher in odd ways, because there's nothing like pain to slow us down and say, oh my God, something is really wrong, And I want to share, there's an author, and I'll share this, of course. There's an author who writes about creating OASIS time. It's all about creating time to slow down before we get to this point of, oh my gosh, I'm knee deep, or I'm head deep in water. And she starts off by describing when she was in her 20s and 30s, how she had this really like go lifestyle. She was going to graduate school. She was, one meeting after another and going from meeting to dinner. And then after dinner, she'd go home. She was working on her doctorate at the time. And she's just doing the midnight stuff like a lot of us do when we're working towards something, right? And what happened is, she got to a point one day, she had an event coming up the next day where she had to present a paper, and she couldn't get out of the bed. I mean, literally could not get out of the bed, was frozen solid. Needed some help getting out of the bed, getting to the doctor, ran all of these tests and whatnot. Turns out she was extremely exhausted, depleted. Now, there are people who don't agree that there's an actual diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome, but it really is a syndrome, and not, it includes a lot of different medical things, but not the least of which is just this state of complete depletion and exhaustion. I'll give you another example. Someone Arianna Huffington, who this writer quotes in her book. She talks about in 2007, Arianna Huffington was at her home office, and she was working, and all of a sudden she blacked out, was on the floor, lying in a pool of blood. She had hit the corner of her head, had to get stitches, broken cheekbone, all this kind of thing. And of course, you think the worst. You're thinking, oh my God, do I have a brain tumor? What happened? Blah, blah, blah. She had all this tests done, so all of these high quality specialists come to find out, same thing. The ultimate diagnosis was extreme fatigue. So her whole book is really about, rather than waiting until we get to that breaking point of, an illness, a disease, or just complete shutdown, we need to start creating lifestyles where we have woven in something called rest, OASIS, Sabbath. So she uses the idea of Sabbath, and not in the religious sense, but in the idea of creating structured rituals and time for deep rest and renewal. So much so that it becomes literally part of your life. Like it's part of your, I'm Kelly Hoey. I do this on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then on Saturday, this is my OASIS. So that's my thought.
Right. I'm gonna like start taking notes on the OASIS I need to, create for myself, and get your tips on how to do this. And I'm thinking to myself, this is so essential now, as we're dealing with so much stress, as an uncertainty. There's no sort of no hard deadline when we're out of this situation. And as I'm thinking, as we're in this new environment where, the work for so many people, their work days have now stretched out further.
Oh, yes.
And they're doing way more jobs, okay, than ever before. But I'm thinking some of this, in terms of this exhaustion, comes from, you could say ambition, but it comes from sort of some of this BS of the hustle culture.
Oh, yes.
Which is just stop. But kind of walk us through some of, all right, Kelly, this is what you should be doing, or here's how you can start to approach this to create, and I love that idea of OASIS, create OASIS as a priority in your scheduling, your time blocking, your life.
Absolutely. So I think, my background, I'm all about mindfulness and awareness. You cannot make any change in your life without first having some degree of self-awareness, and we get to self-awareness through mindfulness, through just stopping and just paying attention to your own mindset, your patterns, your habits, being really painfully honest about, here's how I feel when I do such and such. You just want to be a little journalist in your life, taking notes, starting just there, and seeing where these patterns are of exhaustion, fatigue, mindset. What is it that I'm doing, and what is it that I'm thinking when I'm doing such and such, and then how do I feel? Here's what I've found
like I was saying, sorry to interrupt, it's sort of almost like journaling at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Like taking the temperature of how the day unfolded and what you did. Okay.
Absolutely. You will absolutely determine patterns and start seeing patterns. And what's important about that, I'm glad you asked that, is because you see patterns in something else called rhythms. Wow, every morning I am feeling this way. Every afternoon I am feeling that way. And then it just becomes a reverse engineering equation, right? If I'm feeling this way in the afternoon, then what was my morning? Then what was my morning? What was my night before? Because Ariana always says, a good day begins the night before, right? So if I'm feeling lousy in the morning, then it just begs to question, what was my night like the night before? Did I stay up all night watching the unfoldings of the hearings or the whatever it is I'm watching, to the degree that I have already set myself up for a bad day because I was up all night long churning out, my cortisol over what's going to happen with so-and-so's trial or whatever, right?
Yeah, and I'm thinking what you're saying, and I'm just having this aha moment as we're talking. So years ago, a friend of mine went through the coaching program at the School of Integrative Nutrition, and as part of her training, she needed, a guinea pig, and I was like, I'll be a guinea pig. And I remember she had me do this exercise, this breakfast exercise. So for a 2-week period, I had to have something different every day for breakfast, and then I had to journal. It was sort of like a spreadsheet, how I felt when I was eating it, 15 minutes later, an hour later, 3 hours later, so-and-so. And, that was years ago. That's got to be like 15 years ago. I can tell you to this day, I cannot eat like a muffin. Because how, if you showed me, and you go to delis, I don't know, maybe other people don't know this. You go to a deli in New York and there'll be these blueberry muffins. They'll be wrapped in saran wrap. Right? They're very convenient.
Oh, I'm a New Yorker. I totally know what you're doing.
Right? Show me one of those and I can tell you I will lose my appetite because I know how physically it made me feel.
Exactly.
So anyway.
Exactly. And what I found in my own coaching practice, my clinical practice, is it really is a cycle, right? So what happens? It's, you start making these mistakes. You know, it's poor work, it's mistakes in relationships, it's, you know, oh my gosh, I said something that offended him or offended her or what have you, my coworkers. Okay, so what happens? Then you start doing more work, right? So you start off with this fatigue. The fatigue is a problem. You're not mindful. You're so exhausted. So you're making mistakes. You're late to work. You're not productive, whatever. Then you go into overdrive because it's like, now I got to fix this. Now I've got to make hubby happy. Now I've got to make wifey happy. Now I've got to make my boss or manager happy. Oh my gosh, I got to show up really well for this next business meeting or whatever. So now you're going to go into overdrive and start pumping out even more cortisol to make it right, right? And then you just get even more fatigue. So it's just right. It's that hamster wheel. And so what has to happen is you literally take that step back and say, and you know, journal and whatnot to identify, you know, where are my blind spots? What am I doing? That's just recreating this whole vicious cycle. And what I did with her book is I like unpacked this and came up. I really love like acronyms and whatnot, because when you get a good acronym, you can really just like fly with it and you don't need to, it's not difficult to put certain things in place. So I took the theme of OASIS and I broke it down into those 5 steps, OASIS. I put a little something with it. And I use it in my coaching work to show people this is really easy for like getting started. Start with the O, and we can run down that if we.
Right, let's run down this. Okay, so O is.
Okay, so O. Open your mind to the possibilities and identify your big, compelling why. You know, I find that what is most sustainable is a compelling why, a deep, deep why. Why do, and you want to list everything that you need, right? Like why you need to have this OASIS time. I need it because I'm irritable all the time. You know, so from your journal, I notice that I'm irritable all the time. I snap at my children and I feel terrible about it. I'm not productive at work. You know, my relationships are suffering. Whatever though, you know, and you want to be exhaustive with this list. You want to run down every single reason why, because that's going to be your emotional driver for why you need to do this. You know, if it's just out of fear of, oh my gosh, I don't want to lose my, you know, job, that's not going to be enough, because once you get the promotion and you know your job is secure, it's not going to carry you through. So you want that deep, like in the heart, compelling why, right? And then from there, you want to give your why a purpose. Why, you know, it's like the ladder of why. Underneath every why, there's another why. What's the purpose of this? So if I do better in my relationships, if I give myself this space and time and this oasis, I know that my relationships are going to be better. I know I'm going to be more productive at work, right? You want to start visualizing, what would my life look like if I gave myself this time? If you closed your eyes right now and said, wow, what would it look like if I were able to fly to Hawaii, right? Or wherever. You could imagine, oh my gosh, I'd be so relaxed, and you know, oh, the wind would be blowing through my hair and all this. That's what you want to visualize. You want to see, what would my life look like? Because that creates potential, right? And then from there, you want to say, what is it costing me? What is it costing me to not have this in my life, right? So here's what it's costing me. I'm not moving forward. My career is completely stalled because my husband and I are arguing, and it's costing us the love in this relationship, right? Because when things cost something, it makes you look at it differently. So you've got your compelling why, you've got your purpose, then you've got what it's costing you. And then at the end of that, like I said, what would I gain? You know, we're all motivated by what we gain, right? So that's that big O. The next thing is affirming your declaration. I learned this from one of my teachers in an inner MBA program that I'm in, Richard Strozzi Heckler, and he talks about the need to make a declaration. You know, when you declare, what you're doing in a declaration is you're making a commitment. You're stating what your values are. And you come into your world differently when you make a declaration, because a declaration is different than a want. It's one thing to say, oh, I want to, or I wish I had time off, or I wish I could take the weekend. No, I'm declaring that I am committed to creating OASIS time in my life because I will become a better person in this way. And I value that relationship so much that I am committed to creating this time, right? So that's the A, is affirming a declaration. And then you want to move into just,
I was just going to say, to stop you there, like that whole idea with the values and saying, yeah, what's the value behind this? Because that does make a difference, because it's too easy for other people to encroach. And I remember way back in the day in my life when I was still going into an office, and early in my legal practice when I was, a new lawyer. And I remember someone wanting a document and challenging me why I wasn't going to deliver the documents to them that evening. And I remember saying, because I'm going to the theater with a friend's grandmother and she's 83, and it's a little bit more important than your artificial deadline.
right.
And even that sort of like example, it caused the other person to step back from an irrational pressure demand. But at the point in my career, I could have caved into that. And so I think having those values and having that guardrail. So
absolutely. Kelly, you couldn't have stated it better, because what happens is it doesn't become an argument about what's more important. Do you mean you're not coming to my daughter's such and such? Do you mean you're not going to make time? I came to your such and such. What you're saying in a declaration and in a commitment is that I am not saying no to you. I'm saying no to the invitation. I'm saying no to the obligation. I am declaring what is important for me from a place of value and meaning and purpose, but I am not rejecting you, the person who is making the request. And I think that's a significantly different position than just flat out saying no. We've got this idea, just say no, just say no. But see, when you say no, for most people, that means rejection of the person. It doesn't mean rejection of the invitation. And I think that's a different conversation.
Yeah. And we might have that one day.
Yeah.
You are such a source of information. Okay, back to OASIS, because
So then the S becomes starting small, right? So for people who are high energy, high performance, and I've got some really high performance clients who are just like, oh no, I'm running this corporation, I'm running this organization. There's no way I could do such and such. Some academics who, they get swallowed up in their research and they're running all night long on 24 hours. And what I say is, you can't go cold turkey. I'm not talking about taking weeks off and all this. I'm talking about for that population, start small. It could be something as simple as my OASIS time is every Saturday, from 9 to 10 or 9 to 12 or whatever. And you gradually increase over time. This is not different from the person who's been doing anything forever and needs to just wean themselves off of what it is that they're doing, because what's happening is you're developing neuroplasticity, mind body stuff. You're telling your brain it's okay, the world is not going to collapse, and the sky is not going to crumble if you, Mr. or Miss PhD or corporate CEO, whoever, steps away for 3 hours. And that's what the brain has to hear, that this is okay. And we're going to start doing this every single week. We're going to develop muscle memory, mind, body memory, and it is okay. But you absolutely don't want to start with like a whole Saturday off or a whole weekend off if you've been doing that. So that's that S.
And then also too, I'm guessing that even those small changes can have a big impact.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. For someone who's running on full steam and getting out of the bed at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday after they've been getting out 7 o'clock in the morning all week, getting out of bed a little bit later can be immensely renewing, and then it's like, wow, I'm still alive. Wow, look how I feel, and then they get more motivation. It becomes self-fulfilling,
Right, and also, oh, well, look, the world didn't fall apart. And maybe
Yeah.
if we look at some of this as this is renewing for me to spend an extra hour in bed, as opposed to this is an indulgence. Like I shouldn't be doing this.
Exactly. It needs to be part of your lifestyle. You have a why and you have a purpose, but we've got to shed that language about what we deserve, and this is a treat. Oh, I'm going to treat myself. No. This isn't about treating, and this isn't about deserving. This is about, this is my value. This is my lifestyle. This is how I choose to live intentionally. Period. Full stop. End of sentence. Right?
Big exclamation there.
Yeah. So the I in OASIS is intentionality. I really believe that when you're intentional, you structure. Just like like today, I know that you and I are doing this water cooler. It goes on my calendar. I am committed to it. I am setting up my day. I didn't set an appointment at 2:45 and then I'm going to rush to get to Kelly's event. I have set this. I've created this boundary and this structure. And I think that our loved ones, our colleagues, our friends, family, whatever, people do well when they know that there's some structure, right? They get used to, I know that's Angel's OASIS time or her off day or whatever. And so you put things in place and you're intentional about creating this OASIS. So here's what I've done. I have this little memory book. This is my win journal. What I do at 5 o'clock on Friday in the name of creating this structure is I write down all the great things that happened, right? It's a ritual. All the great things that happened for this week, I put it down. I pick up my calendar. I start writing out all of my appointments for the following week. I put my out of office email in. This is my ritual. So I'm intentional that I'm going to put these things in place. I'm creating this physical and psychological boundary that work is now over and this is now time for my OASIS, right? So it's like literally closing the door and setting a ritual. Now in this book, the author says she even has another practice. She lights a candle. She says a prayer. She says a prayer of blessing for the week that's over. And then now she's got this intentional creation of her OASIS time. And then the last one is just S of seeking validation. Because Kelly, there's this 6 degrees of separation. And you know this with networking. You become, what is it about the 6 people that you spend the most time with? You become,
yes.
Right. So and I really mean this, you've got to create circles of support. Yeah. You've got to, and we talk about this in BYDN, you've got to be intentional about the people you surround yourself with so that they are people who also value a quality of life that is driven by purpose, that is driven by by emotional and mental and physical wellness, right? And they are doing the same thing. They can support you in what you're doing because they too are doing the same thing. And I really do believe that.
And I would say our friend Valissa, I love this. Yes, I was thinking the same thing, Valissa. I love the journal and the boundary. And all I could think of is almost like I'm going back to Sesame Street with Mr. Hooper putting the close sign on the store. Yeah. But then, you think of like a small business owner, like close the cash register, wipe down the counters, flip the sign on the door, and doing that, and giving yourself that kind of space, mentally. And I love that you put your out of office on. You know me, I'm a big fan of that. What signaling that I always say, thinking about what's the signaling we're giving our network, but the idea now that this is a signal to the Neanderthal part of our brain that goes haywire.
Yeah. And you can be, and here's what we can do, is we can create a culture of deep rest and renewal by simple words. When you put your out of office messaging on, you don't want to just say, oh, I'm out of office, I'll be back on Monday. Here's what you want to do. You want to say something that stimulates this idea in the next person. Hi, I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. I'm off to enjoy time with my family, such and such and such, and get the deep rest and renewal that will help me be a better teacher, whatever, for you when I return on Monday. I look forward to seeing you when I return to work, and I wish you a very, restful weekend. Because when people start seeing that, we're creatures of habit. We learn from each other. People start thinking, gee, something? Here it is. It is Saturday, and I am emailing this person on a, you know what? Maybe I should be getting some rest. Maybe I need to turn this thing off too. When people start seeing that, it drives the culture away from what you said at the beginning, which is that hustle, grind, 24-hour FOMO, fear of missing out. If I don't do this, if I'm not, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. This is so good. I mean, things I'm taking away, like, you got to create your oasis. You got to ground it in values. Just taking a little step, even just saying, hey, I'm going to take this 20 minutes, or I'm going to take an hour, or I'm going to, whatever it may, like start small, start changing these patterns. What you've mentioned, Arianna Huffington's book, Thrive. What other resources do you have for us?
Oh my gosh, I want to, because I really, really love her work. Marilyn Paul's book. It's called An Oasis in Time: How a Day of Rest Can Save Your Life. Literally, it is packed front to back with gems. She's got a lot of supportive research in, just about the nature of sleep, the value of sleep. She quotes so many other thought leaders who come from this position as well. Dr. Paul is an organizational consultant, but it's just a book that really needs to be, I think, on every single shelf. And mine is just full of all kinds of highlights, like your book, Kelly, with, Build Your Dream Network, dog-eared, highlighted. And I come back to this over and over and over. It's a staple on my shelf. I would say, if you don't do anything else, get her book. Just a wonderful, wonderful text that you can go back to, and full of exercises and practices and challenges to the mindset. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to, this is just a mindset shift.
Yeah. Well, I will get that one for my growing book list. And give us the title of it one more time.
It is called An Oasis in Time: How a Day of Rest Can Save Your Life. And the author's name is Marilyn Paul, Dr. Marilyn Paul.
Awesome.
Wonderful, wonderful resource.
Okay. And I'm going to guess that you've probably got a whole lot more resources. So I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you if you'll come back again and do this with me.
I would love to. I absolutely, this is what I live and breathe. So I would absolutely love to.
Yeah, and, like having these little conversations. And by the time we do that again, hopefully I will have finished a book that I'm finding fascinating by the author Catherine May, called Wintering, and using this, kind of parallels to nature, but also sort of understanding how sometimes we personally can go through a winter, in the sense of, maybe you lose your job and you're feeling isolated. Maybe there is a health issue, how we personally can go through a winter, and how, I think it parallels to what you're talking about, how we rebel against these things, rather than saying, oh, I need to nurture and use this time to grow and renew, rather than like fighting against it in the way we would, in other seasons or times in our life. So,
and that's what we were talking about in the beginning. Just here we are, and what's that sweet spot? What's that real sweet spot where we're not fighting against, pulling toward, but we're just right here in this season? Because what happens? This season passes, and then the season of renewal and rebirth and regrowth, known as spring, comes, right? So yeah, it really is about leaning into the seasons and the rhythms of our life. I'm going to add that to my book list too.
It's really quite good. She did a wonderful interview. I learned about her from an On Being Project podcast interview with Krista Tippett.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So it was a few weeks. It was not that long ago. So if you subscribe to that podcast, you'll see it. And she's a British author. So, of course, hearing from someone with an accent always sounds good too. But like fascinating in this idea of wintering, and how collectively so many of us were wintering over the past year because of the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Don't you just love when you land on these nuggets? Like they're just nuggets, and it's just like you want to hold on to that because it's so powerful. It really is. And, it becomes a metaphor for so many other things, especially in business and whatnot.
Yes. What I say, our friend Melissa, yes, I'm loving this conversation too.
I am too, Melissa.
So I want to say, but like to keep these virtual water coolers that are,
Yeah.
Like physically, like they're goofing off at the water cooler for 30 minutes. This has been such a wonderful conversation. We will do this again. I'm sure you've got some more ideas for us. This is phenomenal. Thank you, Angel, and it's always good to see you.
Helen, thank you so much for the work you do in BYDN, your absolutely wonderful book, and for your friendship. I am so, so grateful. Thank you so much.
I'm feeling the same way. So blessed. Thank you. All right, everyone. See you again soon.
Bye, all.